Jake Morrison stood in the long white hallway of the Galactic Military Academy. The building was huge and clean, with walls that seemed to stretch forever. Bright lights shone from the ceiling, making everything look cold and perfect. Jake felt very small in this place. He was 19 years old and the youngest human ever to join this school. The academy trained the best fighters from 12 different alien worlds. Each species sent their strongest and smartest warriors here to learn how to fight together. Jake looked around at his classmates. They were all so different from him. The Crotheri were tall and covered in hard shells like giant bugs. They had sharp claws that could cut through metal. Their eyes were black and showed no feelings. When they walked, their feet made clicking sounds on the floor. The Nexari looked like big lizards that walked on two legs. They had scales that changed color when they got angry or excited. Their teeth were like knives, and they moved faster than Jake could even see. They were proud and always talked about how great their fighting skills were. The Vexani were the strangest of all. They looked almost human, but their skin was pale blue, and their eyes glowed with a soft light. They could read minds and talk to each other without making any sounds. Sometimes Jake would see them all turn to look at him at the same time, and he knew they were talking about him in their heads. Then there were the Goliaths. They were like walking mountains made of rock and metal. Each one was 3 times taller than Jake and probably weighed as much as a small car. When they moved, the ground shook. Their voices sounded like thunder when they spoke. Jake was just a regular human. He had brown hair and brown eyes. He was not very tall and not very strong. Next to all these powerful aliens, he felt like a mouse in a room full of lions. The other students did not hide what they thought about humans. They would whisper and point when Jake walked by. Some would laugh at him. Others would just stare, like he was some kind of strange animal in a zoo. Commander Zethkar was the worst of all. He was a Crotheri who had fought in many wars. His shell was covered in scars from old battles. He had lost one of his claws in a fight, and the new one that grew back was sharper than the old one. Every day, Commander Zethkar would find new ways to make Jake feel stupid and weak. During morning exercises, he would make Jake run twice as far as everyone else. When they practiced fighting, he would put Jake against the biggest and strongest aliens. "Look at this soft little creature," Commander Zethkar would say, his voice like grinding metal. "This is what Earth thinks is a warrior? I have seen children stronger than this human." The other students would laugh when the commander made fun of Jake. Their laughter sounded like a mix of roars, hisses, and strange musical notes. Jake's face would turn red, but he never said anything back. He just stood there and took it. The worst part was the combat training. Every day, they would practice fighting in a big room with soft floors. The aliens were all natural fighters. The Crotheri used their claws and hard shells. The Nexari were so fast they looked like blurs. The Visani could predict what their opponents would do before they did it. The Goliaths were so strong they could break the practice weapons just by holding them too tight. Jake tried his best, but he was always the slowest and weakest. When he fought against the aliens, he would end up on the ground in seconds. His body would be covered in bruises, and his clothes would be torn. One day, Jake was matched against a Crotheri student named Vexther. This alien came from an important family. His father was a general, and his grandfather had been a famous war hero. Vexther was bigger than most Crotheri, and moved like he was dancing when he fought. The fight began, and Jake tried to remember everything he had learned. He moved to the left, then to the right, trying to stay away from Vexther's sharp claws. But the alien was too fast and too strong. Vexther grabbed Jake with one claw and threw him across the room. Jake hit the wall and fell to the floor. He could not breathe for a moment. When he tried to get up, His legs felt like water. "Pathetic," Commander Zethkar said, walking over to where Jake was lying. "This is what happens when weak species try to play with real warriors." The other students gathered around. Some were laughing. Others just looked at Jake with pity. Jake slowly stood up, his body shaking from pain and embarrassment. "Maybe humans should go back to their little planet," said a Nexari student. "This place is for real fighters, not for soft mammals." "I heard humans are afraid of the dark," added a Vexani. "How can they fight in space battles if they are scared of everything?" Jake's hands closed into fists. He wanted to fight back, to show them that humans were not weak. But he knew that if he tried to fight, he would just end up on the ground again. "I am not giving up," Jake said quietly. His voice was shaking, but he looked each of them in the eyes. "I belong here just as much as any of you." Commander Zethkar made a sound like laughing, but it was cold and mean. "You belong here? You cannot even stand up after one hit. What makes you think you can be a real warrior?" Jake did not answer. He just walked away, his head held high, even though his body hurt all over. As he left the training room, he could hear them still laughing behind him. That night, Jake sat in his small room and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, his home planet. He thought about his family and friends who believed in him. They had all been so proud when he was chosen for the academy. Jake made a promise to himself that night. He would not quit. He would not let these aliens break his spirit. He might be different from them, but that did not mean he was weak. He would find a way to prove that humans belonged here too, that he did not know it yet, but his chance to prove himself was coming soon. 3 months had passed since Jake first arrived at the academy. Every day had been hard, but he kept going. He studied harder than anyone else. While the other students were sleeping, Jake was in the library reading about battle tactics and weapon systems. The aliens still made fun of him, but Jake had learned to ignore most of it. He focused on his studies and tried to get better at fighting. He was still the weakest in combat class, but he was not as bad as he used to be. Then came the big test. All students had to work in teams for their final exam. Each team had 6 members from different alien species. Jake was put on a team with 5 other students. There was Lisa Carter, the only other human in Jake's year. She was smart and tough, and she never let the aliens push her around. Lisa had grown up on a military base, just like Jake, and they had known each other since they were kids. The team also had Nerdyak, a Nexari, who thought he was the best fighter in the school. He was fast and strong, but he was also mean and proud. He did not like taking orders from anyone. Crix was their Krathiri team member. He was not as big as Vexter, but he was still much stronger than the humans. He usually did whatever Mordak told him to do. Their Vexani teammate was called Sin. She was quiet and always seemed to be listening to thoughts that others could not hear. She would nod or shake her head before anyone even asked her a question. The last member was Rock, a young Goliath who was smaller than most of his kind. He was only twice as tall as Jake instead of 3 times. Rock was nice enough, but he did not talk much. Their mission was to break into a fake enemy base and steal important information. Then they had to get out without being caught. It sounded simple, but Jake knew it would be very hard. The team met in a small room to make their plan. The walls were covered with maps and pictures of the enemy base. It was a big building with lots of guards and security systems. Mordak stood at the front of the room like he was the leader. "This is easy," he said, his scales turning bright, red with excitement. "We go in fast and hard. I will take out the guards while the rest of you follow behind me." "That will not work," Jake said, looking at the maps. "Look at these guard positions. If we attack from the front, they will see us coming from miles away." Mordak's scales turned darker red, which meant he was getting angry. "What do you know about fighting, human? Your species has never won a real war." "I know about planning," Jake said calmly. "I have been studying this base for 2 weeks. There are 17 different ways our attack could fail if we just charge in." Lisa nodded. "Jake is right. We need to be smart about this." But Morduk was not listening. "Smart is for weaklings. Warriors fight with strength and speed, not with books and papers." Jake pulled out a folder full of notes and drawings. He had spent hours working on different plans for the mission. "I have some ideas that might work better. If we come in from the back, we can avoid most of the guards. And if we use the air vents, we can get to the information room without being seen." "Air vents?" Morduk laughed, and his laugh sounded like a snake hissing. "You want us to crawl through dirty tubes like rats?" "It would work," Jake said. "I measured the vents on the building plans. They are big enough for most of us to fit through." Morduk's scales were now almost black with anger. "I will not crawl through anything. I am a Nexari warrior. We fight with honor." Jake tried to explain his plan again. He showed them the maps and pointed out all the problems with Morduk's idea. He had thought of ways to get past the security systems and how to escape if something went wrong. But Morduk was not interested in listening. "You talk too much, human. This is why your species is weak. You think instead of acting." "Thinking is not weakness," Jake said. "It is how humans survive. We may not be the strongest or the fastest, but we can solve problems." "Problems?" Morduk stepped closer to Jake. "You are the problem. You and your endless talking and planning. Real warriors do not need plans. They trust their instincts." Jake could feel the tension in the room. Lisa was watching carefully, ready to help if needed. The other team members were staying quiet, but they were all listening. "My instincts tell me this plan will fail," Jake said. "We need to think about what could go wrong and have backup plans." "Backup plans are for cowards," Morduk snarled. "I have heard enough of your human nonsense." Before Jake could react, Morduk's hand moved fast as lightning. The slap hit Jake's face with a sound like a gunshot. Jake stumbled backward, his cheek burning with pain. The room went completely silent. Even Sin, who was always listening to mental conversations, looked shocked. Lisa started to move toward Jake, but he held up his hand to stop her. Jake touched his cheek where Morduk had hit him. He could feel it swelling up already. His face was red, and his eyes were watering from the pain. "Know your place, mate," Morduk said, using the cruel word that some aliens called humans. "You are here to watch and learn, not to give orders to your betters." Jake looked at Morduk for a long moment. The Nexari was bigger than him, stronger than him, and faster than him. Jake could not win a fight against him, but he did not back down. "I understand," Jake said quietly. His voice was steady, even though his face hurt. "But my analysis is still correct. If we use your plan, we will fail in the first 10 minutes. Morduk raised his hand again, ready to hit Jake a second time. But before he could, their instructor walked into the room. "What is going on here?" asked Lieutenant Voss, a human officer who taught some of the strategy classes. "Nothing, sir," Morduk said, putting his hand down. "We were just discussing our mission plan." Lieutenant Voss looked at Jake's red face and then at Morduk. He was smart enough to figure out what had happened, but he did not say anything about it. "The mission starts in 6 hours," he said. "I suggest you finish your planning and get some rest." After the instructor left, the team went back to planning. But now there was a different feeling in the room. Jake kept giving suggestions, but Morduk ignored all of them. The other team members were too scared to disagree with the Nexari. When the meeting was over, Lisa walked with Jake back to their rooms. "Are you okay?" she asked. Jake nodded, but his face still hurt. "I will be fine." "You should report what happened," Lisa said. "Mordak had no right to hit you." "It would not matter," Jake said. "They think humans are weak anyway. Complaining about it would just prove them right." Lisa was quiet for a moment. "Your plan was good, you know." "It would have worked." "I know," Jake said. "But they will not. Listen to me. They think being strong means you do not need to think." "Maybe they will learn," Lisa said. "When the mission fails, maybe they will realize that planning is important too." Jake hoped she was right. But he also hoped that when the mission failed, it would not be too late to fix things. He had a bad feeling about what was going to happen. That night, Jake lay in his bed and thought about the slap. It had hurt, but not just because of the physical pain. It hurt because it showed him how the other species really saw humans. They did not just think humans were weak. They thought humans did not deserve respect. Jake made another promise to himself. He would prove that humans were not weak. He would show them that thinking and planning were just as important as being strong and fast. He did not know how he would do it, but he would find a way. The mission was tomorrow, and Jake had a feeling it would change everything. The sun was just coming up when Jake and his team arrived at the training ground. The fake enemy base sat on a small moon that the Academy used for practice missions. The building was huge and gray, with tall walls and guard towers all around. Jake looked at the base through his binoculars. Everything was exactly like the maps he had studied. He could see the guards walking around, and he knew where all the security cameras were hidden. "Remember the plan," Mordak said to the team. "We attack from the front, fast and hard. Show them what real warriors can do." Jake wanted to say something, but he kept quiet. His face still hurt from yesterday's slap, and he did not want to make things worse. Lisa looked at him with worried eyes, but she did not say anything either. The team moved toward the base. They were all wearing dark clothes and carrying fake weapons that would mark their targets with paint instead of really hurting them. The mission was supposed to be practice, but it felt very real. Mordak led the way, moving fast across the open ground. The other aliens followed him, their different ways of moving making them look like a strange parade. Jake and Lisa came last, trying to keep up. Just like Jake had predicted, the attack went wrong immediately. As soon as they got close to the base, alarms started going off. Bright lights turned on, and the sound of sirens filled the air. "Enemy soldiers spotted," came a voice over the loudspeakers. "All units respond to the front gate." Guard robots came out of hidden places in the walls. They were not real robots, but they were controlled by computers and programmed to act like enemy soldiers. They started shooting pink bullets at Jake's team. Mordak tried to fight back, but there were too many robots. His scales turned bright red as he got angry and frustrated. "There are too many of them," he yelled. Crix, the Crothery, used his claws to try to break through the fence. But the fence was made of strong metal, and even his sharp claws could not cut through it fast enough. Sin, the Vexani, was trying to use her mind powers to confuse the robots. But the machines did not have minds to read, so her abilities were useless. Rok, the Goliath, was strong enough to break down the fence. But every time he tried, more robots would appear and cover him with paint. In the training rules, being hit with too much paint meant you were dead and had to stop fighting. Within 10 minutes, just like Jake had said, half the team was marked as casualties. Red paint covered their clothes, which meant they were out of the mission. "This is impossible," Mordak said as he wiped paint off his face. "There are too many guards. No one could get through this." The remaining team members, Jake, Lisa, and Sin, were hiding behind a pile of rocks near the base. They were far from the main entrance, but they could still hear the alarms and see the lights. "What do we do now?" Sin asked. Her glowing eyes looked scared. "We could try going around to the back," Lisa suggested, "like Jake said yesterday." But Mordock was not listening. "The mission is over. We failed. There is no point in continuing. The mission is not over until we give up." Jake sighed quietly. "The rules say we have 6 hours to complete the objective." "It is hopeless," Mordock said. "Look at this place. It is like a fortress." Jake looked at the base again. He had memorized every detail of the building plans. While the others had been arguing yesterday, he had been thinking about different ways to get inside. "I have an idea," Jake said, "but I need to go alone." "Alone?" Lisa looked at him with surprise. "That is too dangerous." "It is the only way." Jake said the base was designed to stop teams of aliens. But it was not designed to stop one human thinking differently. Mordock laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "You think you can succeed where we failed? You are just a weak human." "Maybe," Jake said, "but I am going to try." Before anyone could stop him, Jake started moving away from the group. He did not go toward the base like the others had. Instead, he went around to the side where the ground was rocky and full of shadows. Jake had noticed something on the building plans that the others had missed. The base had been designed by aliens who thought like aliens. Each species would naturally try to use their own strengths to get inside. Krathari would try to break through the walls with their claws. Nexari would try to move fast and avoid the guards. Visani would try to use their mind powers. Galiaths would try to smash through everything. But humans were different. Humans were not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. But they could think in ways that other species could not imagine. Jake found what he was looking for on the side of the building. It was a small metal grate that covered an air vent. The grate was locked, but Jake had brought some tools with him. He worked carefully and quietly, using a small metal pick to open the lock. The grate came free, and Jake looked into the dark tunnel beyond. The air vent was just big enough for a human to crawl through. It would have been too small for a Krathari, and too uncomfortable for a Nexari. A Vexani might have fit, but they would not have thought to try something so undignified. A Goliath would never have fit at all. Jake climbed into the vent and started crawling. The tunnel was dark and dusty, and it made his knees hurt. But he kept going, following the path he had memorized from the building plans. The air vents connected to every room in the base. Jake could hear voices and footsteps as he crawled over different rooms. Sometimes he would stop and listen, learning where the guards were and what they were doing. After an hour of crawling, Jake reached the room where the important information was kept. He looked down through a grate in the ceiling and saw 2 guard robots standing by the door. Jake waited and watched. The robots had patterns to their movements. Every 10 minutes, they would walk to different parts of the room to check for problems. Jake timed their movements carefully. When the robots were at the far end of the room, Jake quietly opened the ceiling grate and dropped down. He landed softly on his feet and quickly moved to the computer terminal where the information was stored. Jake had also studied computer systems during his time at the academy. While the other students were practicing their fighting skills, he had been learning about technology and security systems. The computer was protected by a password, but Jake had prepared for this too. He had brought a small device that could try thousands of different password combinations in just a few seconds. The device worked, and the computer unlocked. Jake quickly copied the important information onto a storage device. The whole process took less than 2 minutes, but as Jake was finishing, he heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Someone was coming to check on the room. Jake looked around for a way to escape, but the door was the only way out. Then Jake remembered something else from the building plans. There was a maintenance shaft behind one of the wall panels. It was meant for repair workers to access the building's systems. Jake quickly found the right panel and opened it. Inside was a narrow tunnel that led to the building's basement. It was even smaller than the air vent, but Jake managed to squeeze through. The tunnel was pitch black, and Jake had to feel his way along the walls. He could hear the guards above him, probably wondering how someone had gotten into the computer room after what felt like hours. Jake finally reached the end of the tunnel. He came out in the basement of the building, far from where the guards were looking for him. Now Jake had to get out of the base without being caught. He still had the information, but the mission was not complete until he returned to the starting point. Jake found a service door that led outside. It was locked, but he used his tools to open it. The door opened onto a loading dock behind the building, where there were no guards or cameras. Jake ran across the rocky ground, staying low and moving from shadow to shadow. He could hear the alarms still going off, but they were getting quieter as he got farther from the base. When Jake finally reached the meeting point, he found his team waiting for him. They all looked surprised to see him. "Jake," Lisa called out. "What happened? We lost contact with you hours ago." "I got the information," Jake said, holding up the storage device. "The mission is complete." Mordek stared at him with wide eyes. "You actually did it? You got inside the base?" "How?" asked Sin. "The security was too strong." Jake smiled, even though he was tired and dirty. "I did not try to be stronger than the security. I found a way around it." Just then, a new voice spoke from behind them. "Very impressive, Cadet Morrison." Jake turned around and saw a human man in a general's uniform. He was older, with gray hair and kind eyes. Jake recognized him as General Blackwood, the head of the entire academy. "Sir," Jake said, standing up, straight and saluting. "At ease, son," the general said. "I have been watching your progress during this mission. You succeeded where your teammates failed, and you did it by thinking differently than anyone expected." The general looked at the other team members. This exercise was designed to be impossible using traditional tactics. The only way to succeed was to think outside the normal patterns. Jake felt proud, but he also felt sorry for his teammates. They had tried their best, but they had been thinking like their own species instead of adapting to the situation. "What happens now?" Jake asked. General Blackwood smiled. "Now, Cadet Morrison, you come with me. We have important things to discuss." General Blackwood led Jake to a private room in the Academy's main building. The room was small and simple, with just a desk, 2 chairs, and a large window that looked out at the stars. Jake had never been alone with such an important person before. General Blackwood was a legend in the human military. He had fought in the war against the Andromedans 30 years ago and had saved thousands of lives. "Sit down, son," the general said, pointing to one of the chairs. "You must be tired after your mission." Jake sat down but kept his back straight. He was still wearing his dirty training clothes, and he felt embarrassed to be meeting such an important person while looking like this. "Relax, Morrison," General Blackwood said with a smile. "You are not in trouble. In fact, you may have just saved the galaxy." Jake's eyes went wide. "Sir, I do not understand." The general touched a button on his desk, and the lights in the room dimmed. A holographic display appeared in the air between them, showing images of space. "Tell me, Morrison, what do you think this exercise was really about?" the general asked. Jake thought for a moment. "Sir, I believe it was to test how well we could work as a team and solve problems under pressure." "That is part of it," the general nodded. "But there was a deeper purpose. This academy has been training the best warriors from across the galaxy for more than 200 years. Every species has their own strengths and ways of fighting." The holographic display changed to show different alien species in battle. Jake saw Krathari warriors charging with their claws, Nexari soldiers moving like lightning, and Vexani commanders directing their troops with their minds. But recently, we have discovered something that changes everything, the general continued. We have found an enemy that can learn and adapt to any fighting style we use against them. The display changed again, showing huge black ships that Jake had never seen before. They were enormous, bigger than any human or alien spacecraft. They looked like they were made of darkness itself. The Devourers, General Blackwood said quietly. They appeared at the edge of our galaxy 6 months ago. They have already destroyed 3 star systems and killed billions of people. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Sir, are they another alien species? We do not know what they are, the general said. But we know what they can do. Every time we send a fleet to fight them, they study our tactics and find ways to defeat us. The Krathari sent their strongest warriors, and the Devourers learned to be stronger. The Nexari sent their fastest ships, and the Devourers learned to be faster. Jake was beginning to understand. They adapt to whatever strategy we use against them. Exactly, the general said. And that is why humans might be the key to defeating them. The holographic display showed a chart comparing different species. Jake could see measurements of strength, speed, intelligence, and other abilities. Humans were near the bottom in most categories. Every alien species in this academy excels at what they do, the general explained. But they also follow predictable patterns. Krathari always fight with honor and strength. Nexari trust their instincts. Vizani analyze everything with their minds. Goliaths use their size and power. But humans, Jake said slowly, we do not have one set way of fighting. That is right, the general smiled. Humans are chaos. You do not follow patterns because you do not have any set patterns to follow. You adapt and change and try new things that no one expects. Jake thought about his mission that day. He had succeeded not because he was stronger or faster than the aliens, but because he had thought of something none of them would have tried. Your performance today proved what I suspected, the general continued. While your teammates were trying to use their natural abilities, you ignored all conventional tactics. You succeeded where they failed not in spite of being human, but because of it. The general stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Jake could see the lights of alien ships coming and going from the Academy's spaceport. We have tried everything against the Devourers, the general said. We have sent our best generals, our strongest fleets, our most advanced weapons. Nothing works. They learn from every battle and become stronger. But if humans think differently, Jake said, maybe we can surprise them. That is exactly what we hope. The general turned back to face Jake. Your ability to think outside normal patterns, to adapt and change your approach, to find solutions that no one else would consider. These are not weaknesses, Morrison. They are exactly what we need. Jake felt overwhelmed. Sir, I am just one. Cadet, I do not know if I can help save the galaxy. You will not be alone, the general said. But you will be leading the effort. I am promoting you to Special Tactical Advisor, effective immediately. The general reached into his uniform and pulled out a small metal object. Jake gasped when he saw what it was. A general's star, the same medal that General Blackwood wore, on his own uniform. This is my personal medal, the general said. I earned it 30 years ago during the siege of Andromeda. I want you to have it. Jake's hands shook as he took the medal. It was heavier than he expected, made of real metal instead of the cheap plastic that training medals were made from. Sir, I cannot take this, Jake said. I have not earned it. You earned it today, the general said firmly. You showed that. Humans have something special to offer, something that might be our only hope against the Devourers. Jake looked at the medal in his hands. It was beautiful, with intricate designs carved into the metal, but it also felt like a huge responsibility. "What will I have to do?" Jake asked. "You will work directly with the Galactic Defense Council," the general explained. "We will give you access to all our intelligence about the Devourers. You will study their tactics and find ways to fight them that they cannot predict or adapt. 2. And if I fail?" The general's expression became serious. "If you fail, Morrison, there may not be a galaxy left to save. The Devourers are not just conquering planets, they are consuming them. They leave nothing behind but empty space." Jake felt the weight of the responsibility settling on his shoulders. A few hours ago, he had been just another cadet being mocked by his classmates. Now he was being asked to help save everyone in the galaxy. "I will do my best, sir," Jake said. "I know you will," the general smiled. "And Morrison, do not let anyone tell you that being different is a weakness. The fact that you think differently than everyone else may be humanity's greatest strength." Jake stood up and saluted. "Thank you, sir. I will not let you down." As Jake left the room, he felt the metal in his pocket. It was heavy, but it also made him feel proud. He thought about all the times he had been made fun of for being human, for being weak, for thinking too much. Maybe those things that made him different were not flaws after all. Maybe they were gifts. The mission was just beginning, and Jake knew it would be the biggest challenge of his life. But for the first time since arriving at the academy, he felt like he truly belonged. The galaxy was counting on him, and he was ready to prove that humans could be heroes too. He walked through the halls of the academy, past the alien students who had mocked him. They looked at him differently now, with curiosity instead of contempt. Word of his success had already begun to spread. Jake smiled to himself. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. He would start studying the Devourers and learning how to fight. An enemy that could adapt to any strategy. But tonight, he would rest, knowing that he had finally found his place in the galaxy. He was not just a human trying to fit in with aliens. He was a human who could do things that no alien could do. And that might just be enough to save everyone. The Academy's main auditorium was packed with students from all 12 species. Jake stood at the back of the formation, trying to stay calm. The events of the past few days felt like a dream, but the weight of General Blackwood's medal in his pocket reminded him that it was all real. Today was the final ceremony of the semester. All the students would find out their grades and rankings. Jake could see Lisa Carter standing 2 rows ahead of him. She turned around and gave him a small smile, which made him feel a little better. The big stage at the front of the auditorium was decorated with flags from all the different alien worlds. Bright lights shone down on the podium where Commander Sethkar was standing. The Crothery commander looked as scary as always, with his black shell and sharp claws. Jake remembered all the times Commander Sethkar had made fun of him. The commander had called him weak and pathetic. He had made Jake run extra laps and fight against opponents who were much stronger than him. But now Jake knew something that Commander Sethkar did not know yet. He knew about the Devourers and about his new job as Special Tactical Advisor. He knew that General Blackwood believed in him and thought he could help save the galaxy. "Students of the Galactic Military Academy," Commander Sethkar began, his voice echoing through the auditorium. "This semester has been interesting. We have seen many displays of traditional excellence." The commander's black eyes scanned the crowd of students. Cadet Vexter continues to uphold his family's proud warrior tradition. His strength and skill in combat are outstanding. Jake saw Vexter, the Crothery who had beaten him so easily in their fight. Vexter stood proud and tall, his shell gleaming in the lights. Cadet Mordak's instincts in battle remain unmatched among the Nexari students, Commander Sethkar continued. His speed and reflexes are remarkable. Jake thought about Mordak, the Nexari who had slapped him. Even after what had happened, Jake did not feel angry anymore. He understood now that Mordock had been thinking like his own species, just like everyone else. However, Commander Zethkar said, and his voice changed slightly, this semester has also shown us some unexpected developments. The final tactical exercise has forced us to reconsider some of our assumptions about different species and their capabilities. Jake felt hundreds of eyes turning to look at him. Word had spread quickly through the academy about his success in the mission. Students who had ignored him before are now whispering and pointing. Cadet Morrison, step forward, Commander Zethkar ordered. Jake's heart started beating faster. He walked through the rows of students, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. He could feel everyone watching him as he made his way to the front of the auditorium. When Jake reached the stage, he stood at attention and saluted Commander Zethkar. The commander looked down at him with those cold black eyes. Cadet Morrison, Commander Zethkar said, your performance during the final exercise was unprecedented. You succeeded where experienced warriors failed, using methods that no one had considered before. Jake stood perfectly still, but inside he felt amazed. This was the same commander who had called him weak and pathetic just days ago. General Blackwood has informed me of certain developments that affect our Academy's mission. Commander Zethkar continued. It appears that qualities we may have dismissed as weaknesses are actually strengths of the highest order. The commander stepped down from the podium and walked directly to Jake. Up close, Jake could see that the alien's expression was different than usual. The contempt was gone, replaced by something that looked like respect. I owe you an apology, Cadet Morrison. Commander Zethkar said, my species values strength and directness above all else. I failed to recognize that true strength can take many different forms. Jake could hardly believe what he was hearing. Commander Zethkar was apologizing to him in front of the entire academy. Sir, Jake said, I have learned much from your training. Every challenge you gave me helped me understand my own abilities better. Commander Zethkar extended his clawed hand in the Krathery gesture of respect. And I have learned that the greatest warriors are not always the most obvious ones. Jake shook the commander's hand, feeling the rough texture of the alien's shell. The auditorium was completely silent as everyone watched this unexpected moment. The ceremony continued, but Jake barely heard the words. He was thinking about how much had changed in just a few days. He had gone from being the Academy's biggest failure to being recognized as something special. After the ceremony ended, students began to approach Jake. Many of them had never spoken to him before, but now they wanted to congratulate him and ask questions about his mission. Cadet Vexther was one of the first to come over. The big Krathery looked embarrassed as he spoke. I underestimated you, human. You fought with honor, even when facing impossible odds. Thank you, Jake said. You taught me that sometimes the direct approach is not always the best approach. Other students came up to shake his hand or offer their congratulations. Even some of the Vexani students, who usually kept to themselves, came over to tell him that they had been wrong about humans. But the most important visitor was Mordock. The Nexari approached slowly, his scales showing colors that Jake had never seen before. In Nexari culture, these colors meant shame and regret. I was wrong to strike you, Mordock said quietly. Your analysis of the mission was correct. We failed because we could not adapt to the situation. Jake looked at the alien who had slapped him and called him weak. He could have been angry or demanded an apology. Instead, he chose to be understanding. We all have different strengths, Mordock, Jake said. The key is learning to work together, can respect what each person brings to the team. Mordock's scales changed to show surprise and gratitude. You are more honorable than I am, human. I hope someday I can prove myself worthy of your respect. As The crowd of students began to leave the auditorium. Jake found himself alone with Lisa Carter. She had been waiting patiently while everyone else talked to him. "I am so proud of you," Lisa said, giving him a hug. "You showed them all what humans can really do." "We showed them," Jake corrected. "You are part of the team, too. And there are other human cadets here who have been quietly doing amazing things in their own ways." Lisa smiled. "So what happens now?" "I heard rumors that you are getting some kind of special assignment." Jake touched the medal in his pocket. "I cannot talk about all the details, but I can tell you that this is just the beginning. The galaxy needs humans now more than ever. And they need you specifically," Lisa said. "You proved that being different is not a weakness. You proved that thinking in new ways can solve problems that no one else can solve." As they walked out of the auditorium together, Jake thought about his journey. He had come to the academy as a scared young man who just wanted to prove that humans belonged here. He had been mocked, humiliated, and physically attacked, but he had not given up. He had kept studying, kept trying, kept believing in himself, even when no one else did. And in the end, his differences had become his greatest strengths. Now Jake had a new mission, one that was bigger and more important than anything he had ever imagined. The Devourers were still out there, consuming star systems and threatening all life in the galaxy. But Jake was no longer just a cadet trying to fit in. He was Special Tactical Advisor Jake Morrison, and he carried the personal medal of General Blackwood. He had the respect of his instructors and classmates. Most importantly, he had proven to himself that humans had something unique and valuable to offer the galaxy. The walk back to his room took him through the same hallways where he had been mocked and laughed at. But now other students nodded respectfully when they saw him. Some even saluted. Jake smiled as he remembered his first day at the academy. He had felt so small and weak compared to all the powerful aliens around him. He had wanted to like them, to have their strength and speed and special abilities. But now he understood that being human was not something to be ashamed of. Humans were adaptable, creative, and unpredictable. They could think of solutions that no other species would. Consider, they could change their approach when the situation required it. These qualities had made Jake seem weak to his classmates. But they were the very qualities that might save the galaxy from the Devours. Jake reached his room and sat down at his desk. Tomorrow, he would begin his new job. He would study the enemy that had defeated every conventional strategy. He would look for ways to fight them that they could not predict or adapt to. It would be the biggest challenge of his life. But Jake was ready for it. He had walked away from the academy with more than just a general's medal. He had walked away with the knowledge that being different was not a weakness, but a strength. He had learned that true victory comes not from being the strongest or the fastest, but from being willing to think in new ways and never give up on yourself. The galaxy was counting on him, and Jake Morrison was ready to show them what humans could really do.